All right, guys, and welcome back to the Problem With. And I've been off for a little bit because I had my work going on, which is awesome. And we're preparing for a new school year, and that's exciting. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it, in my opinion. But we will have other episodes of The Lies We Tell, and we should be having back to our regular schedule just once we get the craziness down. But with that, we're in off the record today, and we have two big stories to talk about today. One that is influencing the state of Oklahoma, and it could influence in the whole country eventually. And then we got to talk about more about the deep dive about the Texas floods because that is crazy. So let's start with that. Like this is gonna be a longer episode, and it's not in the sense that is like we broke it off before. Like each segment, you listen to a news clip. Like it's just gonna be me speaking for now because this is very serious. And if you watch, because if you watch the news lately, or if you live in my area, you know we're not dealing with like isolated incidents like they like to say. We are watching the collapse of like what basic governance in real time. We got a like first of all, we got a superintendent in Oklahoma playing politics with free lunches. Yes, school lunches. While in Texas, people are literally drowning in their homes. Roads are underwater, families are stranded, and people are dying. And the GOP's answer to both of these situations: cut the funding, pass the blame, and then run another fundraiser off your misery. And blame it on wokeness because that is my favorite part. They always do. So let's start here at home with Ryan Walters. This man, who I hesitate to even call an educator anymore, has pulled yet another political stunt. Of course, he's now touting universal free lunches for all Oklahoma students. Now, let me be clear, that sounds great on paper. However, here's the caveat. The schools have to provide free lunches without providing a single extra dollar of funding to actually pay for it. Okay? So you heard that right. He wants to offer free lunches, which, yes, again, it sounds great. That's what we want. But he's making schools foot the bill. And what that means, like now, principals and district leaders are stuck asking, do we feed the kids or we fire staff? You see what I mean here? So it's not about, he didn't do it because it was the kindness of his heart. He did it for a political stunt to say, see, all these Democrats don't want to feed the kids. He's doing it and it's obvious. But because I live in a ruby red state whose education is 49, there's people don't care. They actually say, how dare you not feed the kids? We'll get more into it. Now, this guy has made national TV. Like he cries about woke indoctrination. But when it comes to actually feeding the kids, sitting in Oklahoma classrooms, like kids who are hungry, struggling, dealing with poverty at their rates, this state has barely even begun to address. Suddenly, they don't do anything. No money for schools, but always enough for new culture war bills. Always enough to sue the Biden administration back a while ago, or fight any Democratic leader here. And they always fight the CRT dragons. These imaginary things going on. And I want to pause here and just say, this isn't some hypothetical policy failure because this is my community. These are your schools. These are real kids showing up to class with growling stomachs and nothing in their backpacks. Teachers digging into their own wallets again to fill the gap. And now they're being asked to somehow cover full school lunch programs too on what budget? Of what salary? It's theater, man. But the kind of theater where the people in charge are playing pretend with people's lives, and that's where this connects directly, and that's what's happening right now. Because while Ryan Walters is forcing schools to choose between lunch and layoffs, the entire Gulf region is drowning in the past week. Massive floodings across Texas has displaced thousands. Over 120 people have died, and like billions in damage, an entire community submerged. And what's the response from the same Republican leadership that's been in the power for decades? Silence, shrugs, thoughts and prayers. That's my favorite. They say, oh, and a photo op in front of the wreckage. Oh, and comparing the victims to football games and football players. I'll get more into that. So let me say this clearly. The state of Texas has been set up for this kind of disaster. And not by nature, by policy. You can't slash infrastructure budgets year after year. You can't deregulate everything from zoning to emergency management. You can't hand over disaster preparedness to private contractors and just hope it works out. And then act surprised when the system collapses the moment the storm hits. Because these floods, they weren't unpredictable. Climate scientists have been warning about this for years. And instead of preparing, Republican leaders in Texas, just like the counterparts in Oklahoma, Florida, and Mississippi, just to fly these imaginary barrels in schools and libraries while the real storm clouds gather overhead. So again, we'll go talk about these two things in the episode. One, we're going to start with what Ryan Walters' stunt tells us about the cruelty baked into modern conservative policy, especially when it comes to kids, education, and the working families. And we're going to talk about the devastation in Texas. Because this is not just a natural disaster. It's a man-made one. It's a direct result of decades of GOP neglect, corruption, and performative governance. Because this isn't just about the one state superintendent or one state infrastructure. This is a pattern. It's a philosophy because as they starve the public sector, blame the people who suffer, funnel the outrage into fake culture wars, and then ask for your vote again by promising to fix the problem they created. So get ready, because we got a lot to talk about. And if you've been feeling angry, overwhelmed, or just numb to all of it, you're not alone. But now's not the time to tune out. Now it's the time to get loud and get active and demand real accountability. So let's start with Oklahoma. So let's start with the full segment, and let's start with Oklahoma. Because we got to dig deep in what's happening here right now. And what I mean is because I live here and I deal with this personally. Because this is not just a bad policy. It's a political abuse wrapped in patriotism. And it's not just about Oklahoma either. What's happening here is a warning for teachers in public schools across the country. So let's start with the headline. Ryan Walters, Oklahoma State Superintendent of Public Instruction. He just announced that all school districts in the state will now be required to offer universal free lunches, no matter their size, location, or budget. Now, that sounds good on paper. Everybody, we don't want starving children. Free lunch for every kid? It's like, what kind of monster wouldn't support that? Now, but here's the problem, guys. Here's the massive catch. And it's not just a budget issue. It's not just a budget issue. Walters didn't secure a single extra dollar in state funding to pay for the new mandate. No increase in per pupil funding, no emergency support grants, not even a promise of future reimbursement. He just wanted every school district in the state a new bill and just figure out, he just wanted schools to figure out this. So now school boards, superintendents, and principals are stuck making an impossible choice. Do they fire staff to pay for food? Do they cut elective programs or cancel bus routes? Do they eliminate after-school tutoring or reduce special education services? Because none of this was budgeted, none of this was planned, and the same state legislature that has spent years underfunding Oklahoma schools is still refusing to invest in actual support for students. What Walter has done here is the political equivalent of handing you a drowning child and walking away while smiling for the cameras. He gets to say he cares about the hungry children, but he's offloading the real cost and labor to already exhausted educators and then setting them up for failure. And then just take my word for it. School districts across the state have sounded the alarm. In interviews with Oklahoma Voice, News 9, and KOCO, district leaders warned this could lead to drastic cuts and layoffs and long-term damage to already under-resourced schools. Hunger Free Oklahoma, a nonprofit that works on school nutrition access, even said this is impossible to sustain without state investment. This is the same Ryan Walters who claims he's fighting for parents while literally making schools decide between feeding kids or keeping counselors on staff. So let that sink in. And it's not an isolated incident. It's a pattern, a consistent pattern of performative governance where the cruelty is the point. This is a man who talks about parental rights but trashes teachers, who brags about small government but keeps expanding his own department's power, who says that he supports students but only when there's a TV camera nearby, or when he decides to sit inside his car and do his little Twitter rants. And right on the heels of that disaster, Walter drops something even more chilling. I know, hungry children is going starving is bad, but here's what the other part goes. He decided to say the America First Teacher Assessment. So let me explain what that is. because it sounds like a sketch from the Colbert Report, but is a real policy being developed right now in Oklahoma. Here's what Walters is proposing. If you're a certified teacher from like California, New York, any other so-called quote unquote liberal state, and you want to move to Oklahoma to teach, you'll be required to take and pass an ideological test before you're allowed into the classroom. Not a competency exam, not a teaching certificate review, a value test. And he's working directly with PragerU. Yes, that PragerU that is a propaganda machine, to develop the content for this America First assessment. According to multiple outlets, including News 9, KOASU, and News on 6, the test will focus on the following: understanding of the U.S. Constitution, commitment to American exceptionalism, denial of Marxist ideology, and belief in biological differences between boys and girls. Yes, the last one is literally on the test. Walters confirmed this himself. This is a litmus test for political alignment masquerading as teacher certification. And make no mistake, this is not about quality control, it's about ideological control. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an educator, this should alarm you deeply, no matter where you live, because what Walters is doing here is open discrimination. He's targeting teachers based on the state they live in, which is likely unconstitutional under the Privilege and Immunities Clauses in Article 4 of the United States Constitution. Hey, listen, Laird Walters, if you're listening, I know my constitutional rights. States cannot discriminate against citizens of the other states when it comes to fundamental rights, and that includes the right to pursue your chosen profession. Furthermore, legal scholars have already pointed out that this policy could violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment because it applies a different standard to teachers based solely on geographic origin and presumed political ideology. Let me repeat that. Walters isn't testing all teachers, just the ones from blue states. That's targeted ideological gatekeeping and is unconstitutional as hell. And it gets worse because he's not creating this test in consultation with educators, historians, or constitutional scholars. He's creating it with PragerU, a private media outlet known for pushing climate change denial, anti-LGBTQ plus rhetoric, and whitewash history. They're a propaganda machine. PragerU is not accredited. It's not subject to peer review. It's not a curriculum provider. It's a propaganda outlet with deep ties to far-right billionaire networks. And now they're writing the rules for who gets to teach in Oklahoma. Think about the precedent that sets. We're entering an era where teacher certification could depend not on your training, experience, or compassion for kids, but whether you pledge allegiance to a specific political narrative. If you're not American enough by their standards, you are out. If your history lessons include racism, colonialism, or queer rights, or black rights, or anything like that, you're out. If you believe gender is a spectrum, or that slavery was bad, or that democracy requires nuance, you're out. And while all this is happening, schools are hemorrhaging staff. Oklahoma already has a severe teacher shortage. Districts are hiring emergency certified substitutes. Some schools have multiple classes being taught by long-term substitutes with no teaching experience. And instead of fixing that, Walters is putting up ideological walls to keep out qualified educators who don't pass his patriotism filter. It's absurd, it's dangerous, and it's clearly designed to intimidate current teachers too. Let's be honest. This isn't just about out-of-state teachers. It's about Oklahoma teachers as well. This test is a message. Get in line politically or you're next. That's how authoritarianism works. It starts with the outsiders, then comes for the insiders. All of this, the fake lunch policy, the loyalty oaths for teachers, the war on DEI, the censorship, the cultural war curriculum, it's all tied together. This is not about improving education. It's about weaponizing, making it up for he can get voucher in private education so he can push for state funding to go to private Christian or religious schools, mainly Christian schools. It's about punishing teachers who challenge whitewash narratives. It's about rewarding those who parrot state-approved myths. It's about creating a school system where students are fed propaganda instead of meals, and teachers are vetted for political obedience instead of skill. Meanwhile, the actual problem: student hunger, underfunding, trauma, mental health, staff burnout, those get ignored, or worse, they blamed it on the teachers. And the same people pushing this garbage, Walters, Stitt, DeSantis, Abbott, are the ones handing out the tax breaks to oil companies and charter schools chains while bleeding public education dry. Sorry, I forgot to make sure Mullen and Langford and our awesome representative here in this area, Tom Cole. And by awesome, I mean very sarcastically. He's terrible. Like, they always say there's no money. But there's always money for billionaires, for consultants, for religious schools, for cameras and microphones. There's just never enough for your kids' lunch on your classroom or your classroom library. So what do we do with all this? You have to fight it. We have to fight this. We don't just get outraged. We organize. We have to push the lawsuits. Push with lawsuits. We show up to board meetings. We support educators when they speak out, because right now we're being silenced, and we call it this as a state-sponsored educational repression. Now, I'm getting passionate because this is my job. I love teaching. I love doing everything I do. But I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I'm gonna. Never mind. It's very, very sad. Now, and I want to remind every teacher here, all my teacher friends, all the future teachers who want to be here in Oklahoma, keep fighting. You deserve to be here. You're not woke because you believe in inclusion. You are actually a human being who actually cares about each kid. You're not unpatriotic because you teach accurate history. You're not disposable, no matter what Walters and his little parrots instead says, and his political donors think. The teachers. The teachers are the reason the kids are still showing up. You are the reason the system hasn't collapsed entirely, and you are the frontline defense against the kind of authoritarian ideology they're trying to sneak in through the back door of public schools. I got your back. We got your back. And we will keep sounding the alarm every time they try to starve our schools or silence our voices. This isn't just a policy debate. It's a fight for the soul of public education and the future of our kids. Okay, so if you thought Oklahoma school lunch or the test thing was outrageous, buckle up, because here's the main story for the day. Because what's happening in Texas right now, it's heartbreaking. It's enraging, and worst of all, it was so preventable. Now, let's start with the numbers. And I want you to really sit with these. Okay, ready? Over 100 people confirmed dead. More than 100 people still missing. And as of this recording, we're talking about children, parents, teachers, veterans, immigrants, families who gathered for a holiday weekend who never made it home. 36 kids dead. And if you're only just now hearing about this, you're not alone, because coverage has been it started strong and then it slows down because it's like news media. Because Trump does something crazy or stupid, and then the news cycle keeps moving. And that's the worst part, guys. Like, this news cycle moves way too fast that we forget about stuff too fast. That shouldn't be the way. But anyways, it's like, it's underwhelming. If this happened in New York, I mean, CNN will be all over it. I mean, they're all over it, but it's gone too fast. But because it's in Texas, I don't know, man. It's just tough. It's like it's an expected tragedy here. It's like, and expected doesn't mean normal. It's like, repeated doesn't mean inevitable. And I'm gonna walk you through what happened. But this tragedy is so sad. because this was from a lot of the kids that die, sadly, that were dead, were there for families sent them to this camp, thinking that they would be safe. I mean, who would when you're a parent, sending them to a camp is should be in should be something safe for them, because there's counselors, there's security, but seeing that they died like that. Anyways, so let's start from from all the events. Like, where did this happen? Okay, where and when? Like, this happened between July 4th and July 7th. A brutal storm system parked over central Texas. They dumped record-breaking rain all over Hill County, Kerrville, and Hunt and Camp Mystic. That's the heart of it. But flooding reached as far as out as Fredericksburg and San Antonio. Now, meteorologists say it was a 500-year event. But here's the thing. Like, we had about 500-year event in Texas in the past 6 years. So the phrase is losing meaning. And people are losing lives. Some towns in Texas saw 20 inches of rain in under 48 hours. The Guadalupe River in Hunt rose to 26 feet in less than an hour. That's not flooding, guys. That's hydraulic explosion. It's like a tsunami, and like entire rivers turn into walls, entire communities turn into tombs. Now, here comes the tragic one. Camp Mystic, a summer camp for girls that has been around for decades. I mean, people send their kids. This was a very, very well-known camp in Texas. Got wiped off the map. 27 campers and staff are either confirmed dead or still missing. And one of the directors, a man named Dick Eastland, reportedly drowned trying to pull a canoe of kids out of the current. He's a hero. And let that sink in. And a summer camp turned into a mass casualty event, and the state wasn't ready. And they knew it could happen, and they still weren't ready. Now, what went wrong? Because let's get something straight. This wasn't a freak accident. This wasn't an act of God. This was a policy failure from top to bottom at every level. First, the warnings were ignored. FEMA and NOAA had issued rainfall and flash flood alerts days in advance. But the local system in Kerr County took over 90 minutes to send out alerts after the water started rising. So 1 hour and a half after the rain started to flood. And why weren't the flood sirens in the area? Well, here's the reason. Cost. Officials say they were worried it would alarm people unnecessarily. Now you hear that? They were more afraid of panic than they were of people dying. Now, this place is notorious. It's called Flash Flood Alley. It's one of the most flood-prone regions in the United States. It has a documented history of flood fatalities and dating bill sirens. Now, let's go even further. Kerr County was eligible for a 2023 FEMA grant to install both emergency sirens and digital notification systems. The application sat in limbo, never submitted. We don't need to speculate. This is documented. And it's not just sirens, it's the roads, the bridges, the drainage system that haven't been upgraded in decades. Why? Because Abbott's administration and local GOP leaders have spent years slashing infrastructure budgets while letting private developers run wild. Now, because this was a clear effect of deregulation. Let's be very clear about cause and effect here. In Texas, there are no statewide zoning laws. Counties have limited authority to stop reckless development, and builders are allowed to pave over floodplains, disrupt natural runoffs, and build on steep hillsides with little to no oversight. That means when it rains hard, there's nowhere for the water to go except into homes, into cars, into people's lives. The state's obsession with small government has become a death sentence. Because government is supposed to prepare, it's supposed to protect, and when it refuses to do that, people die. Now, let's go back. In 2020, Greg Abbott vetoed a bill that will have required flood impact studies before new development. That's right. He vetoed a bill that would make builders ask, hey, will this neighborhood drown during a storm? So much for the pro-life party, huh? The reason, he said it was unfairly burdened the free market. There he goes again, free market crap. And now the whole neighborhoods are gone. Schools underwater and families ripped apart. Now let's go with the federal response. Let's talk about the government. Let's start with our all favorite, Kristi Noem, the now Secretary of Homeland Security. God, this lady she put a hold on all FEMA contracts over $100,000 so she could personally approve them. Why? Political optics, control. $100,000 for this stuff, guys, is nothing. Like $100,000 for emergency for these kind of catastrophes is nothing. And she said, I want anything that goes above 100,000 to go through my desk. What she do? Nothing. That they asked for emergency funds, and what happened? People were dying. Search and rescue took up to 72 hours. Hear me this out. Search and rescue it took her 72 hours to reach some areas. She took 72 hours. Kristi Noem took 72 hours. I'm going to keep repeating this. To approve for FEMA or emergency rescues to start. Local firefighters were begging for resources and they weren't getting them. 3 days, guys. 3 days. And President Trump, who's already been criticized for a slow disaster response during his previous administration, he flew in on day 5 and did his usual. Photo op with the survivors. Blame it on Democrat-run counties. Call it a once-in-a-lifetime storm. Offer thoughts and prayers. Bring his pal, Dr. Phil, who's... never mind. It was such a dick-sucking contest going on. And what he didn't offer accountability or a plan or funding. And here's what makes it even more insulting. This isn't the first time. And Texas has experienced the following. Hurricane Harvey happened in 2017. Central Texas floods, 2018. Winter Storm Uri, 2021. Floods in Austin, 2023. And now this. Each time, the same pattern. Leaders pretend it's a surprise, they beg for federal money, they blame someone else, and they go back to cutting budgets once the cameras leave. Now, the only difference between Winter Storm Uri and floods in Austin is that as soon as this happened, President Biden actually sent relief immediately. While Hurricane Harvey and Central Texas floods under Trump, they were the same thing. Delayed. And they're going to say this. They still don't believe in climate change. And all of this, every drop of it is happening under the leadership that still refuses to acknowledge climate change. In fact, let's go back in time. 2022, Texas GOP removed all climate language from its platform. 2023, Abbott called climate change a hoax to expand federal power. 2024, Texas passed a law barring cities from setting their own green infrastructure rules. So much for the party of small government, right? Oh, look at how much we want to expand the government now all of a sudden. Then, in 2025, they are begging for federal climate disaster relief while still banning the word climate in official documents. They are not confused. They are committed. They are committed to denial, committed to cruelty, committed to deregulation, even if it kills people. Now, here's some of the human stories. I saw a video of Vietnam veteran Kerrville standing in ankle-deep water in front of his destroyed home. He said, and I quote, "I made it through a war, but I couldn't protect my grandkids from a flood in Texas." And then there's that mother at Camp Mystic holding a muddy backpack, in her voice cracking. And she said, "I told my daughter she'd be safe here. I told her summer camp will be fun." Like, these aren't just sad stories. These are evidence of failure. And these are the stories that are being buried so that Greg Abbott can go to TV and pretend to be a steady hand during crisis. Let me say that again. This isn't nature, it's negligence. This isn't a one-off, it's a warning. Like, what do we do now? It's like, where do we go from here? Well, we need to demand investigations. Like into the sirens, into the ignored FEMA grants, into the vetoes and deregulation that led us here. Push for real climate resilience. That means zoning laws, green infrastructure, emergency planning, not just thoughts and prayers. I'm done with that crap. Thoughts and prayers wouldn't get you nowhere. Organize, because if it happened in Texas, it can happen in Florida, it can happen in Oklahoma, Georgia. This cut now, pray later. Politicians are a virus. These people who are saying this, they're viruses. The GOP are a bunch of corrupt politicians who only care about their bottom dollar in their own pockets. They don't care about you. They don't care about the people. They don't care about anybody. They will cut to the most and get involved in everybody's life and claim it for patriotism or fiscal responsibility. Now, here's what I'm going to say. Nowadays, there's no such thing as natural disaster. Not anymore. Disasters are made by policy, by politics, by the people who knew what could happen. And they did nothing. The question is not whether storms will come, because they will. The question is, will we be ready, or will we keep letting the same people gamble with our lives and call it governance? And so this will be my other closing segment about the Texas thing. Because this wasn't just a failure of the state legislature or the state governor, anything like that. This was a good failure on national, federal level. Okay? Like, this is not longer what's polite, not what's strategic, not what's politically palatable, but what's true. I'm going to say, like, this disaster, it was a mass death event in Texas. Again, it wasn't just a local failure. It's not just a sad coincidence or a series of bad weather days. Because this was engineered through years of political choices made by people who were warned and chose to look away. And the first name that belongs in the top of that list, Donald J. Trump. Because while the Texas Hill County drowned, it wasn't just bad luck. It was a direct result of cuts made under Trump's administration of the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. Also, I call it douche because that is what it is. A department that he created through executive orders. And it promised a streamlined disaster response. Because let's break this down. DOGE, which was run by Trump loyalist Elon Musk, they have zero disaster management experiences. It wasn't just about efficiency. It was about control. It was about gutting existing federal agencies like FEMA, NOAA, and the National Weather Service and rolling their oversight into a politically appointed task force inside the fucking White House. And what did they do? What did DOGE do? Slash federal emergency planning funds by 38%. The terminated climate resilience grants that had already been approved under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. They redirected FEMA flood mapping funds into a private risk assessment firm with deep ties to oil and gas interest. And fired over 600 employees of the National Weather Service and NOAA. And when watchdog groups raised the alarm, when FEMA career staff resigned in protest as well, when cities started losing access to data, they were ignored, smeared the deep state, or simply replaced. So what happened next? States like Texas, led by people like Greg Abbott, who already didn't believe in regulation, took that as a permission to go even further, to slash even deeper. Because why invest in flood protection when the federal government had just told you that climate science is a hoax, and emergency planning is red tape? It was a green light to fail, a blank check for death, and now that's exactly what we got. Now let's talk about again Greg Abbott, because he is amazing at this. The governor of Texas who showed up at the press conference on day 4 of the flood, and he had the gall, the sickening, shameful gall, to compare the deaths of over 120 people to the same as a Friday night's football score or Friday night's game. Like, let me say that again. We lost over 120 people, but if you look at it compared to the size of the storm, that's like a bad football game, not a tragedy. Now, the other part, and The other part that is crazy to me is that he said we in Texas love football. The language blaming is a language of losers. Like when a team loses, a winner doesn't blame. They a winning team would don't point and finger at each other. They just say, "Hey man, we got it." And the losers will. It's like motherfucker. This was not a football game. A football game. If you lose, you see the next day. These people will not see it in another day. Imagine losing your child in a flood. Imagine watching your grandmother's house collapse into a river. Imagine being trapped on your roof for 48 hours without food or water, waiting for help that never came. And the leader of your state compares it to a fucking football game. That's not leadership, guys. That's a sociopath. Abbott didn't declare full state emergency until day 3. He didn't request coordinated FEMA aid until after the media caught wind of the death toll. And instead of calling for reform, for accountability, for answers, he tried to spin the loss of life as a win. Because in his mind, it could have been worse. He's an arrogant piece of shit. He's morally bankrupt. We need investigations now. We need federal investigation, and not just into Kerr County, not just into the sirens that never got built. We need investigations into the Trump's Doge program and whether it violated the Stafford Act and the Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Amendments. We need to investigate Greg Abbott vetoes of emergency planning bills and refusal of federal funds for infrastructure, because we need to know if this was a lot of vetoes because of oil and gas lobbying. We need to investigate Kristi Noem's delay of FEMA contracts during active search and rescue operations. And then investigate corruption in state contracting, where flood mitigation funds were funneled into private real estate developments, especially in Austin, San Marco, and along the I-35 corridor. This isn't politics anymore. This is mass negligence. This is a state-sponsored death. Like, and then the other thing I heard, and I hate this so much, from fellow left-wing media, that don't wait until 2026 when we have power in Congress and in the Senate to impeach. No, we can't do this anymore, guys. We cannot wait for the next thing, because obviously the Democratic Party are a bunch of cowards that don't want to impeach the man. If this happened under Biden or under Obama, even if the Republican Party was the minority, they would have pushed for impeachment, no matter what. Because they have. They've done it. And here's the other thing. Donald Trump should be impeached. Not over hush money, not over some technical violation of the Emoluments Clause, but for willfully dismantling the very system meant to protect American citizens from disasters like this one. Because this is the first time he's done this. But it should be the last time. He created Doge not to protect people, but to centralize power. He gutted FEMA. He defunded NOAA. He attacked climate science. And now we over 120 people in Texas just that shows it. If this is not impeachable, what is? And yes, I know the House is run by Republicans. I know, I get it. People will say it won't pass. But if we demand it anyway, because people deserve to know that this government, even in this dysfunction, still has a conscience, or at least a memory, or morals. All you need in Congress is one Republican vote to pass that impeachment clause to go to Senate. I get it. In Senate, they will probably turn it down. However, it gets the ball rolling, because what happens? Because this man needs to be impeached. Because this is not an isolated event, guys. Texas has now more than 2,000 disaster deaths in the past 8 years. More than any other state in the country, more than hurricanes in Florida, more than wildfires in California. And why? Because Texas is run like a business, not a state with people. And business doesn't care about bodies, it cares about profit. Look at the record. Hurricane Harvey, 103 deaths, billions in damage, and still no statewide building code update. 2021, Winter Storm Uri, over 700 people die. The grid collapsed, ERCOT officials resigned, Abbott did nothing, and Ted Cruz left in the middle of the freeze storm to go to Cancun. In 2023, East Texas floods, 46 dead, emergency funds delayed for months. And now this year, 120 dead, and governor who shrugs it off like a sports stat. Like, we cannot let this be forgotten. No more excuses, guys. And I need to say something else, and some of you might not like it. Stop making excuses for the Democrats who say nothing. Where are the televised hearings? Where is the outrage from the so-called progressive leaders? Where are the damn town halls? They'll tweet about climate once every other election cycle. They'll post a picture with a fucking windbreaker next to some solar panels and then go quiet. Meanwhile, people are dying. And don't even get me started with some of the left-wing. Oh God, I'm back to that. I'm back to this, man, because I see it again. I'm so frustrated with this again. Every time. The ones with the thumbnails, the TikToks that are telling the truth, with the telling the truth, who do 5-minute react videos to these floods and say, "Oh man, this is crazy," and then move on. Guys, again, we don't need reactions. We need a resistance. If you have 2 million subscribers, I don't give a shit. 500,000 subscribers. You should be telling your subscribers to call, demand for justice. And you need to do it yourself. I'm so tired of that, man. Because what comes next? We have to call for a DOJ investigation into Doge and FEMA failures. Demand state audits of emergency planning funds in Texas, Oklahoma, and Florida. Why? Because Texas runs the same way as Oklahoma and Florida. Launch public inquiries into whether political appointees delay rescue operations. Organize impeachment resolutions, even if they won't pass, but they will somehow. Pass city-level climate mandates, even if the state tries to override them. And if they don't listen, if they keep playing the game with our lives, then we stop playing nice. Because here's the truth they don't want you to say out loud. They don't fear storms. They don't fear floods. They fear you, the people, getting angry enough to fight back. And again, I'm going to say, it's like if Abbott compare this to a football game. They say it was acceptable kind of thing. They call it inevitable. But the score wasn't 21-7 in a football game. The score was 120 people dead and 160 still missing. This was a massacre. Engineered by greed, powered by negligence, and wrapped in an American flag like it was a patriotism. Oh, sorry, in this case, the Texas flag. It was murder by policy. And I won't forget, and we won't forget. And we won't forgive these people. You gotta remember these people. You gotta remember them. When it's time for voting them out, you have to make sure your boomer of family understand that these people will not care for you. What just happened? They got Medicare, Medicaid. How many of your parents, or not parents, like older folks, deal with that? Oh, look at that. The Republicans cut it. And if they're willing to vote again for the Republican Party, they don't care about anything. They just care about owning the libs. And you know what? I don't know. I'm glad the Medicare costs didn't get cut, because then they can die of diabetes. Sorry, that was dark, but it's just so frustrating. I don't wish death upon anybody. It's just sorry, I shouldn't say that. That was really bad. We need something. Anyways, let me finish this. All right, so I know I said that Texas floating was going to be the main story, and it was. But I want to finish this up with close out this episode. It's a reflexive of myself of what's going on here in Oklahoma and the education, because I want to make something clear for the record. It's funny because this is off the record, but anyways, Ryan Walters does not care about education. He does not care about your child. He does not care about your school district. He does not care about literacy or music or critical thinking or even the basic dignity of educators. Ryan Walters is not an educator. He's a culture war mercenary, a petty political stuntman with a chalkboard and a Bible in one hand and a torch in the other. He's the Secretary of Education in Oklahoma, and he's the single greatest threat to public education the state has ever seen. And I'm not exaggerating, guys. This has been record. Ever since he took power, our education has gone from bad to worse to worse. Because the evidence is staggering. Let's look at his record. I always state facts. Since taking office, he's attacked teachers as Marxist. He's called the Tulsa public system a woke disaster and tried to withhold accreditation. He pushed a curriculum banning references to systemic racism or gender identity, violating federal civil rights guidance. He blamed leftist indoctrination for everything from failing test scores to school shootings. And then he recently just announced the support to universal free school lunches, but with zero additional funding. And also, here's the other part he did. He called teacher unions terrorist organizations. His rhetoric led to a bomb threat in schools. Now, let me say this again. And then back to the universal school lunches thing. Like, fit the kids, or fire the teachers. That's because he's not providing any funding for both. This is the ultimatum he just gave every public school in Oklahoma, and then he called it a victory. That's sabotage. He is playing political games again. Now let's call it why. Why does the GOP hate education so much? Because let's cut through it. Why is he doing this? Why attack education with this much hostility? Here it is why. Because a literate, empowered, historically informed student body, especially one filled with kids of color, is dangerous to the status quo. Because white conservative power in Oklahoma and across this country has always depended on controlling what people believe before they can think critically. Let me read you a quote from James Baldwin, and I quote, "The purpose of education is to create in a person the ability to look at the world for himself, to make his own decisions, but no society is really anxious to have that kind of person around." Now imagine that person is black or Latino or native or trans. Now imagine a person wants to vote, to unionize, to run for office, to fight back. That's what the GOP fears. That's what Ryan Walters fears. And that's why we are waging war on the classroom. For the teachers, for the kids. Because this is a moral attack. Because he will say, and they'll say, is restoring order to the classrooms. Whatever. They'll say it's protecting kids. Bullshit. They'll say it's just wants parental rights. Bullshit. But let me ask you this. What kind of parental rights include banning books about Ruby Bridges or Martin Luther King Jr.? What kind of education secretary threatened school with funding cuts for teachers for funding for teaching the Trail of Tears? Especially here in Oklahoma, where we have a lot of Native American education. What kind of so-called Christian uses his office to demonize any queer student, undocumented families, and black educators? He calls himself a Christian, but demonizes anybody. That is not what Jesus taught. I don't know what kind of Christianity he knows. Oh, I know, the KKK style. It's not about morals. It's about control. It's about using morality as a weapon, as shield for cruelty, and cover for racism. Now let me contrast Ryan Walters with actual voices of educational leadership. Here's something like Linda Darling Hammond. She's the president of the Learning Policy Institute. She said, When we invest in education, we are not just preparing children for jobs, we are preparing them to live in a democracy. Ryan Walters is trying to turn schools into obedience camps, not democracies, not sanctuaries, not places of truth. Obedience, loyalty, submission. What about Dr. Pedro Noguera, Dean of USC Rocher School of Education? And I quote, "You cannot close the achievement gap while simultaneously widening the opportunity gap." Oklahoma is ranked near the bottom, almost last, one spot away from last nationally in per pupil spending. Yet Walter spends hours a week. God, he spends hours a week on live streaming, talking about drag shows and woke books. He's widening the opportunity gap. He's making our schools less safe, less supported, less truthful, and less human. Now let's go with John Dewey, American philosopher and educational reformer. And I quote, "Democracy has to be born anew every generation, and education is the midwife." That's why Ryan Walters wants to kill it in the womb, because he doesn't want democracy. He wants dominations. He wants fascism. Sorry, theocracy actually is what he wants. This man is not alone. He's backed by the dark money PACs like Every Kid Counts in Oklahoma, funded by Betsy DeVos donors, Christian national organizations pushing for school vouchers and religious curriculums, oil and gas interests who see educated communities as a threat to their unchecked pollution and exploitation. Every teacher fired, every librarian silenced, every council laid off, that's a dollar freed up for corporate cronies and private contractors. He's turning your child's future into a marketplace. He's selling school values to the highest bidder. And people are resistant. Teachers, students, parents. Because the Oklahoma Education Association has called Walters unfit to lead. That's very light language. They try to be professional. I think he's worse than that, but whatever. Multiple superintendents like Dr. Deborah Gist of Tulsa have resigned or spoken out. My opinion of that, when you have a position of power and you resign, that's a coward's way out. You stay there and fight until the bitter end. Now, parents are organizing town halls, protests, and lawsuits. Black, Latino, Indigenous leaders are calling out his dog whistle politics in local media. Even Republican lawmakers like Senator Adam Pugh have quietly questioned his leadership and public behavior. Because Ryan Walters isn't just an embarrassment, he's a liability to public trust. So I'm just saying this again. Ryan Walters must be removed. Through impeachment, through resignations, through recall. Any legal means available. We must use it. Because we cannot allow this man to hold hostage our schools, endanger our teachers, indoctrinate our children in hate. We cannot let a petty, insecure, politically weaponized bureaucrat who has never... Sorry. I almost lost it there. It's like, whose biggest achievement, I guess, is... I don't know what his biggest achievement is anymore. Teacher of the Year in McAllister somehow. Like, how does you become the moral gatekeeper of education in this state? I know why. Because you are a racist. Is why you are. I'm just going to say, and the other thing. Like, he doesn't... I just keep saying this, guys. I'm going to run in circles all the time. But I don't know what else to tell you. If you're a superintendent who is fighting this fight, don't resign. That's what he wants. That way he can implement his fucking cronies. Don't take the coward's in. It's like, don't go the coward's way out. Fight. Stand for your children. Like, these are my closing words for this, because this is frustrating. Especially the way that he's like every year, especially during the summer, this man does something that should be removable. But because Oklahoma is again ranked low and 49th in education, obviously people are not media literate, or critical thinking is very low. Anyways, but I'm just gonna say, the these people are not afraid of chaos in the classroom. They're afraid of clarity because they're not afraid of disruption. They're afraid of liberation. Because once a student understands how power works, once a child sees through the lies, they stop being obedient and they start becoming dangerous according to them because they know what to think. They see through their bullshit. And that's what this is about. It's not just about budgets. It's about the truth. It's about freedom. It's about who gets to tell the story of America and who gets to erase from it. Ryan Walters wants to erase the truth. And I am here and we are here to tell it even louder. The real history of what this country has done. If you're in Oklahoma, call your representative, demand a vote of no confidence, organize in your district, pack the next school board meeting, connect with the OEA, the Oklahoma Education Association, join the PTA chapters. You need to go to these things because obviously the GOP fills these things with hire people from out of state to create chaos. Again, you have to do it. You have to be alert. We are in a very dangerous situation again. You have to be involved. I'm going to keep saying this. Be involved in anything. You are paying taxes for schools. You should be showing up. And again, if you don't show up, then you're staying silent. And silence is complicity. Just because it's not affecting you doesn't mean that it's going to affect anybody around you. Demand for better. Tell these fuckers that we want you removed. I want you gone. I want this state to be better than what it is right now. We deserve better, guys. To anybody who's listening, thank you for listening. I appreciate you. If you say, well, what are you doing? Listen, guys. Even just me doing this podcast, I'm putting my career on the line. Because if you live in Oklahoma, you understand how dangerous Ryan Walters is. But I'm still fighting because what I say is freedom of speech. I haven't said anything wrong. Everything here that I'm saying is factual evidence. I'm not saying anything that this man hasn't done. It's nothing that I haven't said anything here in this podcast that I haven't been search and fact check and all that. Anyways, be loud, guys, because we can't allow this to happen. Anyways, thank you for listening. It's just demoralizing. We lost so many people in the past week, and the Republicans are just there saying, "Who is your fault?" Anyways, we got to demand better. Stay safe out there, guys. See you next time.